The House of Shadows stood at the edge of the village, its presence a constant reminder of the unknown horrors lurking within. Its windows, shattered and dark, seemed to watch every passerby, silently begging for attention while warning them to stay away. The front door, hanging slightly ajar, creaked ominously in the wind, as if inviting those brave enough to uncover its secrets. The villagers spoke of the house in hushed tones, sharing tales of strange noises, ghostly apparitions, and an overwhelming sense of dread that seeped from its very walls. Yui, a determined young woman with a thirst for adventure, had heard these stories since childhood. The more she heard, the stronger her curiosity grew. One moonless night, unable to resist the call of the unknown, she decided to venture into the House of Shadows. Armed with only a lantern and her resolve, Yui approached the decaying structure. The air grew colder as she neared the house, and an unnatural silence enveloped her. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, the rustling of leaves and the chirping of insects eerily absent. With each step, the weight of the house's dark history pressed down on her, but Yui's determination never wavered. She reached the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest, and hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The interior of the house was even more foreboding than its exterior. Dust and cobwebs covered every surface, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. The faint light from Yui's lantern cast long, flickering shadows on the walls, creating the illusion of movement in the darkness. As she ventured deeper into the house, the floorboards creaked under her weight, each sound echoing ominously through the empty rooms. Yui paused in the hallway, listening intently. She thought she heard a faint whisper, but dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks on her. Yet, as she continued, the whisper grew louder, more distinct. It was as if the house itself was SP.
The darkness inside the House of Shadows seemed alive, a palpable entity that wrapped itself around Yui as she moved through the decaying halls. Every step she took was met with the creak of ancient floorboards and the soft whisper of voices long forgotten. It started as a faint murmur, barely audible over the sound of her own breathing. But as she ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder, more distinct, weaving together into a haunting chorus that sent chills down her spine. Yui. The voices called, drawing her name out in a slow, mournful chant. She paused, lantern held high, casting its feeble light in a desperate attempt to penetrate the gloom. The air was thick with dust and the stench of rot, but beneath it all was a sense of desperation, an almost tangible plea for release. The whispers seemed to come from all directions, making it impossible to pinpoint their source. Yui's heart raced, but her determination remained unshaken. She had come to uncover the truth, and she would not be deterred by mere voices. Yet, there was something deeply unsettling about the way they spoke her name, as if they knew her, as if they had been waiting for her. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to move forward. The hallway stretched out before her, seemingly endless, lined with doors that led to unknown horrors. Shadows danced on the walls, taking on grotesque shapes that twisted and writhed in the dim light. Each door seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the whispers grew louder as she approached them, urging her to turn back. Yui, leave this place. One voice hissed, filled with a mix of sorrow and malice. But Yui could not turn back now. She had to see what lay beyond. She reached out to open one of the doors, her hand trembling. As she pushed it open, the hinges groaned, and a rush of cold air hit her, carrying with it the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and sharp. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, but as she stepped inside, Yui found herself in a room filled with antique mirrors, their surfaces clouded with dust and age. The flickering light from her lantern cast eerie reflections, each one a distorted echo of reality. She could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon her, the air thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. The whispers that had haunted her since she entered the house seemed to converge in this room, growing louder, more insistent. As she approached the largest mirror, she wiped away the grime, revealing her own face staring back at her. Her eyes were wide with fear, her skin pale under the dim light. But as she looked closer, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Behind her, in the reflection, stood a pale figure, a woman with long, dark hair and empty, soulless eyes. Her face was twisted into a grotesque smile, and her hand reached out as if to touch Yui's shoulder. Yui spun around, her heart hammering in her chest, but the room was empty. The figure was gone, leaving only the oppressive silence and the sense of being watched. She turned back to the mirror, her hands shaking, and saw her own terrified face once more. But the figure had returned, now closer, its eyes boring into hers with a malevolent intensity. Desperation clawed at Yui's mind. She backed away from the mirror, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, filling her head with a cacophony of voices. She could hear them calling her name, urging her to leave, to escape the house before it was too late. But the door was shut tight, refusing to budge no matter how hard she pulled. She was trapped, the room closing in around her. The mirrors reflected her fear, each one showing the figure growing ever closer. Yui felt a cold hand on her shoulder and screamed, spinning around to find the room empty once more. The sense of dread was overwhelming, crushing her under its weight. She could feel the presence of the house, its malevolent energy seeping into her. The door slammed shut, and the spectral figure appeared, whispering an ancient curse. Yui was trapped, her reflection fading in the mirrors. Text: Yui stood in front of the house's door, her hands trembling as she reached for the handle. The whispers had grown louder, filling her mind with a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from all directions. She knew she had to leave, but the door was stuck, refusing to open no matter how hard she pulled. The house seemed to be alive, its malevolent energy pulsing around her, trapping her within its walls. Suddenly, the door slammed shut with a violent force, shaking the entire house. Yui stumbled back, her heart racing, as the spectral figure of the pale woman appeared before her. The woman's eyes were empty and hollow, her face twisted into a malicious expression. She moved closer, her lips moving as she whispered something in an ancient, guttural language. Yui couldn't understand the words, but the tone was filled with malice and hatred. Yui felt an invisible force pulling her backwards, her feet barely touching the ground as she was dragged towards the center of the room. She struggled against it, but it was too strong, pulling her inexorably towards the mirrors that lined the walls. The reflections in the mirrors were distorted and blurred, showing not only Yui's terrified face but also the spectral figure, standing right behind her with a twisted smile. As Yui was pulled closer to the mirrors, she saw her reflection begin to fade, becoming blurry and translucent. Panic set in as she realized that she was being drawn into the mirrors, her very essence being consumed by the house. The whispers grew louder, filling her mind with a deafening roar that drowned out all rational thought. Desperation clawed at Yui's mind. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The spectral figure was right in front of her now, its eyes boring into hers with a malevolent intensity. Yui could feel the cold breath of the figure on her knee.